Hey everyone, Wolf Lord Rho here. Today we're talking about the home of the Ultramarines, with the Library of Ptolemy. Spoiler warning to begin, as the events we're discussing today are from the Warhammer 40k novel Courage and Honour by author Graham McNeill. As always, I really recommend you read the stories for yourself first without spoilers, as that's the best way to enjoy the lore for yourself. But with that said, let's just jump straight in. Macragge, home of the Ultramarines. About as revered a world as you'll ever get across the Eastern Fringe. Behind Terra, it could perhaps be the most famous world across the Imperium entire. The fabled capital of Ultramar. For 10,000 years, the people of the Imperium flocked to the world from the galaxy over, to visit the fabled fortress of Hera, alone a creation of marvel, but importantly the site of the legendary shrine of Roboute Guilliman, the only place in existence where you could view a Primarch, a tangible link to the time of myth. Guilliman sat upon his throne, locked behind stasis upon the brink of death. Rumours forever spread that maybe, just maybe, his wounds were healing, and as such pilgrims in unimaginable number arrived on Macragge with each passing day. But of course now the throne sits empty, for the Primarch once again bestrides the stars. Yet if you were to think the wonders of the Fortress of Hera were long gone as a result, well, you may find yourself corrected, as Guilliman himself was instrumental in its design, and it bears all the hallmarks of the Primarch's genius in its creation. It is a beacon of prosperity, a light amid the ever-encroaching dark. None more so than the Library of Ptolemy, home and bedrock of all the knowledge possessed by the chapter. Indeed, since the very days of the Legion. And there's an absolutely fantastic sighting of this fabled place, back within the Uriel Ventris novel, Courage and Honour. The Library of Ptolemy was one of the marvels of Ultramar, a repository of knowledge that stretched back tens of thousands of years, to a time when fact and certainty blurred into myth and fable. Legend told that it had been named for the first and mightiest of the chapter's librarians, and the breadth of knowledge contained within its sprawling depths was greater than the Agrippan conclaves, more diverse than the Arcanium of Telios, and it was said contained practically every word crafted in all human history. An entire spur of the mountain range upon which the Fortress of Hera was constructed was given over to the library. Its many wings, archives, colonnades and processionals formed a man-made peak of gleaming marble and granite to rival the highest mountains of Macragge. The tops of soaring columns were lost in the deep shadows of the distant roof, and the floor of veined green marble gleamed like ice. Towering bookcases of steel and glass rose to unimaginable heights to either side of a central nave, each stacked with an impossible number of chained books, scrolls, info wafers, maps, slates, data crystals, and 1,000 other means of information storage. Graceful marble arches spanned the chasms between the mighty bookcases, forming separate wings and kilometers of stacks that required detailed maps or guide scrolls to navigate. Only the chapter librarians fully understood the layout of the library, and much of its twisting depths and dusty passageways had remained untrodden for centuries or more. And this is one of the fantastic things about the Library of Ptolemy. In an Imperium so divorced from the reality of its history, and an Imperium that's forgotten more than it could ever hope to realise, here we have a secure repository of history, a bastion of knowledge, at least as much as there can be one in this current Imperium. And in itself, this library is the perfect symbol for what Guilliman is trying to bring back to this current era. A symbol of what it's lost. Knowledge, education, celebrated, embraced. This Imperium operates in secrets, limiting, actively preventing knowledge from spreading, suspecting anyone who dares to improve themselves with education, eradicating those it deems who know too much. It has an entire inquisition who, at its core, revolves around just that, who are by far and away the biggest hindrance to Guilliman's new establishment of historians, researchers, whose job it is to go out across the Imperium and actively gather knowledge, to try and piece together an accurate history of the Imperium. What a perfect representation of the current Imperium's failure, that its own so-called servants resist that, oppose it. And yet here on Macragge, within the Fortress of Hera, we have an entire spur of the mountain range given over to being a repository of knowledge. A celebrated repository. Again, the tops of soaring columns were lost in the deep shadows of the distant roof, and the floor of veined green marble gleamed like ice. Towering bookcases of steel and glass rose to unimaginable heights to either side of a central nave, each stacked with an impossible number of chained books, scrolls, info wafers, maps, slates, data crystals, and 1,000 other means of information storage. Just by its grand architecture, you can feel it being at odds with the Imperium around it, how it belongs in the time of the Great Crusade, the Golden Era as opposed to now. Like some kind of revered time capsule, a mirror to the shrine that Guilliman was locked in. And within the centre of this vast monolithic structure sits the Arcanium, the most ancient heart of the library, and a secured vault guarded by the Ultramarines Librarius. The Arcanium was the heart of the library, its approaches guarded by silver-armoured warriors who bore long polearms with shimmering blades, and whose helmets were high hoods veined with side-disruptive crystalline webs. None had challenged them as they approached, but Uriel was not surprised, for these guardians would already know of their purpose, and could divine any ill intent. The interior of the Arcanium was a 20-metre square cube with an arched doorway in each wall, softly lit by thick candles held aloft in iron scones, worked in the forms of eagles and lions rampant. Its walls were constructed with bare timbers, weathered and bleached, as though reclaimed from a distant shoreline, and the floor was made of dark slate. The character of the room was quite out of keeping with its surroundings, having the appearance of a far more ancient structure that had existed long before the arrival of the library. A heavy table of dark wood filled the centre of the chamber. Upon this table were 4 enormous tomes, their spines a metre long and thick enough to enclose a book 1/3 of a metre deep. Each book was secured to the table by a heavy chain of cold iron through the faded gold leaf edging of their leather bindings, and the pages were off-white vellum that had yellowed with the passage of millennia. Tightly wound script filled each page, each precisely formed and arranged in perfectly even lines of text. Uriel took a deep breath at the sight of these books, letting the myriad aromas settle in the back of his throat and transport his mind back to the age of their creation. It is, of course, the Codex Astartes. Not just the Codex Astartes, the Codex Astartes. The very tomes first inscribed by Guilliman himself, 10,000 years ago. the most hallowed and revered artifact in Ultramarines history. Heck, in all Space Marine history. 4 books, each a metre in size, packed full of every aspect of Guilliman's formidable tactical knowledge. The foundation of the Astartes since the days of the heresy. The tomes, you could argue, that kept the very Imperium alive. They aren't on Terra, not on the throne world, not within the palace, but they are here, in Ultramar, on Guilliman's home, within the Library of Ptolemy, where they were wrote, and where they belong. Permanently guarded, kept safe, by the Ultramarines chapter, the sons of Guilliman, and the bearers of his legacy. And we can't overstate how revered and important the original codex is, especially at this time, why it's within the Arcanium, the heart of this library. Remember, this is long before the thought of Guilliman returning could ever be believed, when he was sitting barely a few miles away in a shrine within the same mountain range. The codex penned by him was the closest thing to ever hearing him speak. It was him speaking to his sons, to all Astartes. You know, for all the epic Primarch duels and grand battles in the lore, for all the emotional moments of conversation, you really can't underestimate the impact of these simple descriptions. The sightings and bringing to life of these hallowed locations, places and landmarks we may have heard briefly from a codex decades ago, yet here you get to see brought to life before you. A few descriptions of grand arches, pillars, bookshelves, old ancient tomes, yet it evokes so much meaning, so much sense of history of this 40k universe that we all love. The kind of lore moments you really can't overlook, and the ones I truly appreciate and love. The times you get to see these iconic places we've grown up on. The Fortress of Hera, the Fang, the Rock, the Arx Angelicum, the Imperial Palace. Names that just give you that feeling of awe, of legend, of legacy when you hear them. And the Library of Ptolemy, beacon and foundation of all of Ultramar's knowledge, is most definitely one of those locations, and a landmark location in the lore that deserves its moment of recognition. But as always everyone, what do you think? Does the legacy of the Library of Ptolemy mean even more in the current Imperium than it did back in the Golden Era? Is it a bastion of knowledge that can serve as inspiration to the rest of the Imperium? A location Guilliman can point to in his quest to raise up the people? And is it the kind of example Guilliman wanted Dante to bring to Baal? What other locations are there across the lore that you feel can stand alongside such legendary landmarks? And are there any other loyal Primarch lines you feel do an equal job in preserving the knowledge of the past? Is it perhaps in this area the legacy of Magnus is missed the most? As always, leave your thoughts in the comments below. Huge thank you to all my subscribers, your support truly means a lot to me, it really does. If you're new, please consider subscribing to help the channel grow. And if you enjoyed this particular vid, then why not drop a like on it too. But with that said, I am off, and I'll see you all again real soon.